Stings the corner. You know it's coming. You still can't stop it.
It's Jay Alter and it's Charlotte North. It's the Lacrosse Rundown. Maybe coming off the most epic week of the season. A little bit biased, but we're back.
No doubt.
We're
No
back from
bias at
ACC
all.
tournament, Charlotte, North Carolina. We spent a week down there with everybody. It is the best week of the year, despite it being a conference tournament. We get to hang out. We get 3 days of unbelievable matchups, and I think it lived up to the hype.
Well, it all started a week ago tonight with our live show from Charlotte, which was awesome. Great interaction. Thank you guys for bringing it every single week. You give us so much passion and added motivation to talk about the sport we love. And honestly, the NCAA tournament's special for its own way, but the conference tournament, because there's through those 3 games in 5 days for the winning team, it really is, I think, more difficult to win than an NCAA tournament because the competition is so high. And boy, were we treated to what was an absolutely unbelievable showcase for the sport in the ACC championship game between North Carolina and Boston College. That first quarter, which ended 5-5, I was telling people, I've been doing this for a long time, 15 years, falling in love with this sport. Those 15 minutes, I think, were the best that I have ever seen.
Wow. I mean, my jaw was on the floor for half the quarter because of the types of goals that were being scored. And Jay, we talked about the road to this potential rematch between the top 2 teams in the nation. And it feels like everybody in the lacrosse world was expecting it and wanted to see it, but it was a much different matchup than the one we saw in the regular season. And we kind of expected that as well, because when they met in the regular season, it was a little bit of a sloppy game, for lack of a better term. And it wasn't either team's best performance, and it didn't showcase the star power that both teams have as well as this one did.
Yeah, I think I'll use another sports analogy here, kind of like a heavyweight fight. And that was round 1, that regular season matchup, where you're kind of just feeling each other out, playing a little tight. Did not happen in this championship game. Both teams came out guns blazing, throwing knockout punch, taking it, throwing it again. The goalie play was spectacular. Like someone said to me, it was a little low scoring. I expected more offense. I'm like, did you see some of the saves? It could have been 20 goals apiece. Betty Nelson and Shea Dolce were standing on their heads. So I was really just impressed that neither team played poorly. Like both teams played well enough to win. And I think they did establish themselves as the top 2 teams in the country, like we've been saying for a couple of months now.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Shea Dolce set an ACC tournament record for saves in her 3 games, and her save percentage as well. I think it was 57%, which is just ridiculous.
Crazy.
The types of saves that she was making on the shooters that North Carolina has was bonkers. But the depth of North Carolina was shining through at the end of that game. I mean, it really came down to the final plays, but
yep.
which we expect, and we'll get to a potential round 3 later on. But the depth in the midfield, I think, is what won them the game. It was Kate Levy. It was Eliza Osborne, 2 freshmen in their number 1 overall recruiting class on the biggest of stages, coming up with draw controls and sparking transition, which it felt like those were the moments where momentum shifted and North Carolina had the edge.
I'm glad you brought up Kate Levy, because I was rewatching the game this morning, and Kate Levy's goal to go from 12-11. So BC's got the ball, a chance to tie it at 12. She causes the turnover, runs full field, and scores to make it 13-11. That was the difference. You talk about the fine margins, Charlotte. That was the fine margin, an individual making an unbelievable play to win the game. And another point that I wanted to make is that fourth quarter. So North Carolina wins 8 of the 9 draw controls in the fourth quarter. I thought Boston College lost their legs a little bit. That allowed for a Kate Levy goal to run full field, because normally a Boston College team would track down and transition defense and not allow that to happen. So I was thinking to myself, why did they lose their legs? They're so well conditioned. They're such a great team. I think the toll of the Virginia quarterfinal and the Stanford semifinal caught up to Boston College. in that championship game. And that's exactly what we were talking about here on the Lacrosse Rundown a week ago, is BC had the harder path, and it showed up in that fourth quarter.
I know we talked about it right here. I mean, it was a much harder path. Look at where Virginia is in the national poll, and they had to play them in the quarters, not even the semis. And North Carolina had a bit of an easier path. They won both their quarter and semifinal games by 10 goals. They rotated a lot of their subs in, and North Carolina also played the earlier game on both of those days. Boston College played the 5 p.m. game on Wednesday, and then they played the 8 o'clock game on Friday night. But, I mean, again, it feels like we're going to see these two teams again. It feels like they're going to make small tweaks, both of these teams, as they continue into the NCAA tournament run. But there were a lot of other takeaways I had, Jay, from this week. And it wasn't just Boston College and North Carolina, but I took away from a Stanford Cardinals team that played with a lot of fight. Don't sleep on them in this NCAA tournament run. Don't sleep on them when number 13, Jordan Case, is in the lineup. She took a majority of the draws against Boston College. She, in my eyes, is one of their best offensive weapons off of the dodge. I mean, she's an incredible athlete, but a very strong lacrosse player who I think gives them a lot of juice.
Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot of Stanford during our selection show, which you can watch 9 o'clock Eastern time on ESPNU Sunday. You don't want to miss it. The 29 teams will be announced and make up our NCAA tournament bracket. We're going to talk a lot of Stanford, and for good reason. They definitely, depends on their path, right? If they can get into that 4-5 pod, right? That doesn't even need to say they need to be 4 or 5, but if they can just get into the pod, right, they'll have a chance. Clemson's another one. Like, this is a Tigers team that did not get to the ACC semifinal by fluke. They were very good in the regular season, absorbed a really difficult 4-game losing streak. Take away that 4-game losing streak, they have been very consistent. And to me, it's their defense, because even against North Carolina, we saw them for the beginning of that game limit the Tar Heels' opportunities. And now they're going to get a couple of weeks of practice without Kayla McLeod to rework things offensively. I think Clemson is going to recalibrate here, kind of get some momentum, the passion, the enjoyment that comes with making the first NCAA tournament in school history, and kind of ride that wave. Wouldn't be surprised if they make a run in the NCAA tournament.
I can't wait to see their watch party on Sunday night. I can't wait for everybody in the country to get to see that, because they've never made it. They've been on the bubble, and their backs were against the wall on Wednesday afternoon when they played Duke. They had to win that game to get off the bubble, and it feels like they did enough to get in the NCAA tournament for the first time in their short 3-year span of being a Division I team in the ACC. They're playing inspired lacrosse on the backs of leaders like Paris Masarakia, who had a ridiculous game in the semifinal game against North Carolina. But she's a member of that defense that has the makings to shake some things up in the NCAA tournament. So I took that away too. The Stanford team and the Clemson team, if they're in your side of the bracket, look out.
And we want to hear what you guys thought about the ACC tournament. It was so much fun to call. I hope our passion came through in our call. Charlotte and I were going nuts in the booth with she and Stanford Birch. But we want to hear what you have to say. You always have great opinions. So drop a question in the chat right now. And, we're going to continue to talk about this tournament as we get into the NCAA tournament for sure. But it was not the only conference tournament going on this past weekend. How about the Big Ten tournament, which delivered an awesome championship game? Maryland came to play. I think that was the best the Terps have looked this season, Charlotte, and they could be another team peaking at the right time. Obviously, Northwestern did win, we should say. Wildcats champions again in the Big Ten, and much deserved. But I think the takeaway is that this Maryland team could be poised for a run.
Watching that game back, the Big Ten championship on the same day of the ACC championship, what a day for lacrosse fans nationwide. But that game was a defensive battle. JJ Suriano, the goalkeeper for Maryland, had 18 saves against the number 3 team in the nation in Northwestern. It felt like it wasn't real. It was a video game type performance by her, but it was coming on the heels of a 13 save performance in the semifinal game in Maryland's win versus Michigan. So 31 saves in 2 games. We talked about Shea Dolce and Betty Nelson in the ACC championship. How about JJ Soriano for Maryland? Absolutely stonewalling a Northwestern offense that we've talked about on this show has gotten better every single week. And in the end, it was Aditi Foster who scored the game winner off of a pass from Emerson Bolig. But Northwestern struggled with the Maryland man-to-man defense. And we've talked about Maryland's defense for it feels like decades. They have produced some of the best defenders that we know of in this sport. But that was a defensive clinic.
The key to tournament play is survive and advance. And that is exactly what Northwestern did. It doesn't need to be pretty. You just need to find a way to win. Even in the semifinal, Johns Hopkins gave Northwestern everything they could handle, but the Wildcats hung on to a 1-goal win, and then they had another 1-goal win in the Big Ten championship game. So winning ultimately doesn't matter what the score is, doesn't need to be lopsided, and Northwestern has continued to find ways to win. You just get the feeling that that championship pedigree, the culture that's been built in Northwestern, shows up in the big moments to secure these big wins. And another Big Ten championship for Kelly and Monty Hiller's team. Again, they're going to be the number 3 seed in this NCAA tournament because of that regular season head-to-head loss. I still think Boston College goes above them. You do not want to be in their pod. We were talking about how Stanford wants to be in that 4-5 pod. You do not want to be in Northwestern's pod because they look like they are on a mission.
And we talk about the selection show this coming Sunday. There is a tall task ahead after this coming weekend for the selection committee. But we know a lot of it is geography based. And so now Northwestern has locked up with that automatic qualifier. They're 100% in the tournament. We think they're going to be the number 3 seed. But think about all those teams now in the Big Ten and where they're going to be placed. Could we see a Michigan match up in the quarterfinals with a Northwestern, giving us an elite Big Ten matchup? Could we see a Stanford in that pod?
Could happen.
Because they're on the West Coast. I mean, it's going to be so interesting to see the teams that get in, but also where they're placed. I think that's the story this year, where everybody is put and the road that each team has, specifically Northwestern, because it feels like they are hungry. They're ready to prove people that they're one of the best teams in the nation. And we know they have been all season long, but they want another crack at a Boston College or a North Carolina.
And here's the reality. If Northwestern is going to win a national championship, they're more than likely going to have to avenge those regular season losses and beat Boston College in the semifinal and then North Carolina in the championship game. So it's entirely possible, but that's the road that lies in front of them.
Absolutely. And we talk about the ACC and the Big Ten. Now, both conference tournaments are done. We have the winners. We have the automatic qualifiers locked up. There is still a lot of lacrosse left to be played before Selection Sunday. Most other conferences finish up and have their championship this coming weekend. So most automatic qualifiers are still on the table. But for the Big Ten and the ACC, think about those teams. They're now home. They're done with their conference tournament. They have over a week and a half now to look in the mirror, watch the film, get back to work, do the little things, and prepare, although they don't know who they will be facing or if their name will be called on Selection Sunday. But they have way more time to rest and recover than the teams that are playing in this upcoming weekend.
And is that a benefit, Charlotte, or would you rather be playing this weekend? Because it's interesting, and you went through this as a player. Like this week, I have to imagine, I don't know. I'd rather be in a rhythm, but what about you?
I mean, it's tough because these conference tournaments are no joke. You saw Northwestern play 2 1-goal games in the semifinal and the final, and it takes a lot out of you, especially if you don't have a lot of depth. And a lot of times, this is the time of the season that people are banged up with minor, tweaks and fatigue, and this is the time where you want to get ahead in terms of recovery. And you still want to be able to go out and practice and have a very competitive practice, because that's how you make game day feel easier. You go out and you beat up on each other in practice. You have the ultimate compete level. And then when you get to the game, in the first or second round of the NCAA tournament, it feels easier than a day of practice. That's the goal. But you also have to be to make sure that you're allowing for enough time to recover from a conference tournament. For the ACC, it was 3 games in 5 days for some of these teams, for 2 of these teams. So you've got to give yourself grace, but also understand that for those 2 conferences, this is where you could get an edge in terms of preparation.
Yeah, that recovery time could prove to be critical for the conferences that are going to play this coming week and weekend. Who do you have your eye on? Pick one that you really want to sink your teeth in here.
This is too hard because I have my eye on 2, and I think you guys know based on how much we've talked about this on the Lacrosse Rundown that one of those is the Ivy League. But before we get there, I want to get to the Patriot League. Chase Boyle just set a program record for goals and draw controls. Imagine holding both of those records at a storied program like Loyola. Chase Boyle, the 2-way midfielder, the reigning Tewaaraton finalist from a year ago. She passed Grace Gavin on the goals record, and she passed Jillian Wilson for the draws record. I mean, 2 records in 1 performance sets up an epic run for the Patriot League Championship. Now, Loyola plays Holy Cross in the semifinal of the Patriot League Championship, but I've got my eyes on Army Navy in the other semifinal, a 1-goal game in the regular season. Jay, does it get any better?
No, it does not. And here's the good news for the Patriot League. Some years you go in thinking, is it a 1-bid league? Not this year. They did enough in the regular season where I actually think you're going to get 3 teams in. So I think the loser of Army-Navy still gets in. I think the winner definitely secures that spot. And I think Loyola is in. So even though there's only 1 automatic qualifier that goes to the champion, I think we see all 3, Loyola, Army, Navy, in the field of 29.
So you don't think if Army or Navy, if they win that semifinal game and then they go on to win the Patriot League title, that's not a bid stealer?
And I'll tell you why. No, I don't. Because I think Navy's win against Virginia carries them, and I think Army's win against Stanford carries them. So they each have that critical top 10 win in non-conference play. And one of them is going to pick up another quality win by beating the other. So I think you get all 3 in. And I wouldn't be surprised if the winner of Army-Navy beats Loyola. I echo everything you just said about Chase Boyle and the Loyola program, but just feels like I'm going to go out on a limb and say Army in particular, under head coach Michelle Tumalo, and I think maybe the best midfielder in the country in Bridget Duffy, they're ready to take that next step. And that next step is winning the Patriot League. So I don't like to make predictions on this show, but I like Army. I feel like they're playing really quality lacrosse.
Yeah.
And again, do you want to see them if you're a Boston College or a North Carolina? Like, obviously, you'd still be favorited, but that's going to be a fight. And no one's been able to stop Bridget Duffy. So we'll see. There's a lot of lacrosse left, like you said, but I am jacked up for that Patriot League tournament.
I agree. I believe on this show a couple weeks ago, I mentioned Navy beating Loyola potentially in the Patriot League Championship, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Army either. I like the winner of that game as potentially the winner, but we'll see. We got Georgia Latch on that Loyola team who is in top 10 in scoring in the nation. I mean, quietly top 10. It feels like she's just creeping up and having a great year for the Greyhounds. So that's one that I'm very excited to see. The other one, the Ivy League tournament. Jay, it was only fitting that the final game of the Ivy regular season, it was Yale and it was Cornell. And the final of that game had so much impact on who was going to be in the Ivy League tournament. It's only fitting.
I know. And it goes to overtime, and Yale comes down from 4 goals down in that game to win. Really impressive performance by a senior class that continues to get it done when it matters most. Here's the thing. I've got a message to the Ivy League tonight. If you're watching the Lacrosse Rundown, which we know you are, expand the tournament. This is ridiculous. 4 teams? Come on.
I would agree with you.
We need your conference has depth to it. It has quality to it. And to not have Harvard in it is ridiculous.
Harvard or Cornell, because those are 2 teams that could legitimately make the Ivy final.
Yes. and win their way in. Give them a chance to win their way in. Now they're sitting at home with nothing. It's all out of their control.
Yeah. Well, you see that Yale wins it over Cornell in the final seconds. It was Fallon Vaughn with the game winner. Sky Carol-Squillo tied it up late in regulation. But Yale had to win to get in. Now, they're not even the 4 seed. They're sitting at the 2 seed in the Ivy League tournament. So that win did a lot for them. They're going to play Penn in the semifinal game. Again, the madness of the Ivy League this season. Let us know what you guys think about this. Yale plays Penn in the semifinal of the Ivy League tournament this coming weekend on Friday. That was a double overtime game in the regular season. Jenna Collignan had the game winner. We highlighted it on this show a couple weeks ago. But that is the kind of matchup that I expect seeing again, because both Princeton versus Brown and Yale versus Penn must see TV this Friday.
And I think we're going to get that Yale-Princeton championship game. And the winner of that game, I don't think this is controversial, is a lock to get a top 8 seed. Remember, of those 29 teams, only the top 8 are seeded, and they get to host. The winner of that game, automatically a top 8 seed. The loser, honestly, might have done enough to also earn a top 8 seed. So another thing to follow as we talk Selection Sunday in the NCAA tournament.
I mean, my mind is just stuck on the fact that Yale almost missed the Ivy League tournament, yet they're the 6th seed right now in the projected NCAA top 10 rankings. So that to me is just showcasing how strong these conferences are, how much has shaken up, how many upsets there have been,
right,
and how valuable this upcoming weekend is going to be. We talk about the job the selection committee has. My goodness, this is going to be down to the wire. And you mentioned Yale maybe having the edge in the semifinal game against Penn. I think the Quakers remember that overtime loss against Yale. It was their senior day. It was on their home field. And you mentioned Bridget Duffy, one of the best midfielders in the country. They have Anna Brandt right up there in that conversation as one of the best middies in the country. So I think this comes down to the wire. I don't know if a team has an edge. I just think it's going to be who shows up and plays their best. And then from then on out, they could be on their way to earning a top seed in the tournament.
I feel like you need to start the Anna Brandt fan club if there's not one already. I mean, you've been hyping her up the last couple of weeks, and rightly so. Can I get a quick point in on the Ivy men?
Yes, please.
I know we're going to talk CJ Kirst in a second, but just about their tournament, okay? Penn finishes the season 4-10, 1-5 in conference, and they should have beat Notre Dame in South Bend this past weekend. They were winning that game. Crazy comeback by the Irish to win in that fourth quarter. The Quakers, led by Griffin Skane, shout out Izzy Skane's younger brother. If that team is 4-10 and 1-5 in conference, I'm sorry, this might be the best conference in the history of lacrosse. Cornell, best team in the country.
Yep.
Princeton, I think, is the second best team in the country.
I would agree.
And then Harvard and Yale have proven that they can beat anybody. So those are the 4 teams that are in it. Could you imagine? Someone put this out there the other day. I forget who. What if Yale wins? What if Andy Shea and Yale's just like, you know what? We're going to go win this thing. They're going to get in
thief. Yep.
As a bid thief.
Yep.
Because I think Cornell, Princeton, and Harvard all get in. They're locks.
I don't know. I can't argue with that because I think you got Cornell and Princeton. If I had to do a bracket right now, I would have them at championship weekend. Now, there's a chance that they could lose, but that's what shakes out this weekend. So you guys right now on our show, on this live stream, if this isn't incentive enough to turn on your TV this weekend, I don't know what is, because there will be bid thieves all over the country. And that's what's so awesome about this sport. Now, we mentioned bid thief on the men's side. We've talked about the bracket being smaller on the men's side. So there are significantly less teams. So when someone wins their automatic qualifier and they weren't already a lock to get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament, they're taking away some team that's on the bubble, taking away their chance to get into the tournament.
Well, one team we know is into the tournament is the Big Red of Cornell, led by Tewaaraton winner. That's right. I'm calling it now. I called it a month ago. CJ Kirst, who did make history what can you say? Career goals. Think about this. Nobody has scored more goals in the history of the sport than CJ Kirst. Unbelievable.
And we've talked about it. We're witnessing history right in front of our eyes. And it's hard to imagine that this record will be touched again because he's one of the most prolific scorers that we've ever seen in the game. Of course, it was the opening goal of the game on senior day against Dartmouth. And even more than that, his entire family in the crowd, his brothers hugging him. I mean, watching the video, it was unbelievable. A moment that I think Lacrosse fans won't forget for quite some time. But the Big Red, I mean, they're the heavy favorites to win this Ivy title.
I think they're the favorites to win the entire thing. And what a storybook ending to the Kirst family story, which we've heard so much about. They've dominated championship weekend, it feels like, for the last 3-4 years. If CJ can be the one to lift the trophy for Cornell, I'm getting choked up thinking about it. And it would be so deserving. Now, a lot of lacrosse needs to be played out, and this is not Hollywood. Someone could totally upset them, and there goes the great story. But it's been something phenomenal to follow, and I think all lacrosse fans and all sports fans can appreciate what CJ Kirst has meant to Cornell and meant to the sport.
It's unbelievable, and I cannot wait to see him play professionally. I know we have the PLL draft coming up, but there's no question he's going to go number 1 overall. But even deeper than that, he's going to potentially, hypothetically, join a Water Dogs team in the PLL that has an explosive righty attacker in Michael Sowers. Insert CJ Kirst, an explosive lefty attacker. You've got two sides of the ball, opposite ends of the field, where they can force a defense to slide and shift, and then the other one's on the backside. What do you do?
That's going to be unreal. And are we going to be going up against the PLL draft, the Lacrosse Rundown, head-to-head, 8 o'clock next Tuesday? We might be.
Well, next Tuesday, you guys, it might be our best show of the entire year because we're breaking down the NCAA tournament. Now we'll have the bracket for you guys. We'll have everything coming off of the selection show, the reactions. We can't wait to talk with you guys about it, but a lot is left to be played. And Jay, we talked about our epic week in Charlotte, North Carolina, the ACC women's tournament. How about this coming week in Charlotte, North Carolina at American Legion Memorial Stadium, the ACC men's lacrosse tournament?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's two teams in particular that go down there with a lot of pressure on their shoulders, and that's Syracuse and Duke. I think they go down there knowing that a win puts them in, but a loss puts them at risk. You were just talking about the bid thieves. Those are the teams, I think, Syracuse and Duke, that if they don't win, could be in jeopardy, right? And I think Syracuse in particular, this is a team that has the talent, but for whatever reason, they're not making those winning plays down the stretch. I mean, awesome fight to come back against North Carolina in that fourth quarter, but once again, they fell short. And if they lose to Notre Dame in that semifinal, that first game of the ACC men's tournament, it's a team that goes in to Selection Sunday on a 3-game losing streak with opportunities to have won those games and falling just short.
I know. And I think Syracuse's win in the regular season versus Notre Dame gets them off of the bubble comfortably, but a win against Notre Dame and then a win on Saturday or Sunday, of the ACC tournament puts them in and allows them to host. Imagine hosting at the Dome where they've been drawing 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 fans each game, breaking every record this season and in the recent years of attendance. I mean, I feel like they're gonna be in regardless, but they could be given the toughest road if they lose on Friday.
Agreed. And similarly, can Duke beat North Carolina? That was an epic 1-goal regular season matchup. Can Duke find a way to beat the Tar Heels and get to the ACC championship game? You know, all 4 teams can win. We know that. That's what makes this tournament so special. Is truly all 4 teams can walk away with that trophy. It's just usually when we're talking about this, Charlotte, all 4 teams are in the tournament. Yeah. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, usually if you're in the ACC tournament, one of those 4 teams, your spot's secured in the NCAA. I just don't think that's the case this year, especially with the bid thieves. Syracuse and Duke are on the bubble, and a win would put them in.
I mean, it's a rare year if these 4 teams plus Virginia are not in the conversation of making the NCAA tournament. Now, Virginia, their season seems to be over. They did not make the ACC tournament. For the men's side, there is no quarterfinal day because there are only 5 teams and only 4 make the tournament. So Virginia was the 5th team out of 5. They're sitting at home, and it feels like their season is over. But for these 4 teams, it's semifinal to championship game. It's two days of competition instead of 3 for the women. So the task is shorter, but it's equally as difficult because of the competitiveness of this conference. And I'm looking at Duke with a must-win situation more than Syracuse.
I agree with you. If they both lose, Syracuse would get in over Duke. But if you win, you can take care of business. So we'll see how that all plays out. One question for an off-season show is, you mentioned those 5 ACC teams. If there was going to be a sixth team that gets added, who would it be? So that I want to get into that in the off-season.
You know my answer.
BC Eagles. Seriously. I can't even. I'm getting the red bandana uniforms.
But imagine
the men's team.
How successful they were when they were an NCAA Division I team.
Right.
And imagine the talent. Any of you guys watching right now in the New England area, there's a lot of women's lacrosse talent, of course, at the youth level, but there is on the men's side as well. So the amount of local talent that they would pull, the competitive nature of the ACC and the history of the program, I just feel like it's a no-brainer, especially with the success of the women's program. And 6 teams in the ACC, now you get an automatic qualifying bid. So we mentioned this before on the show, but whoever wins this upcoming ACC men's tournament, they get the trophy, but they don't get an automatic qualifying bid because there's only 5 teams.
Right.
You have to have 6.
No, that's why you need to add a 6th team. So that's something that we want to do a deep dive on in the off season. We're running long again, Charlotte. I'm
sorry.
Keep talking. So let's go questions here. We got some great questions. And if you want to be a question next week, once this episode is over, drop it in the chat. You will get priority. So Charlotte, what do we got?
Best time of the week. You guys gave us epic questions on our show last week when we were live from the ACC tournament. Things are starting to heat up. That's why we could talk forever. But here we go. Madeline asked, how do you prepare mentally for games?
And that's a great question, Madeline, but how do you mentally prepare for these tournament games in particular? And is it a different mentality, Charlotte?
I think you got to fall back on your routine and your preparation all year long. And as athletes, you start to get a feel and a sense for what works for you to be as locked in as possible on the opening draw or the opening face-off. And for me, it was doing the same things. And I'm superstitious. Maybe some of you guys watching right now aren't superstitious and you kind of just go with the flow and you do something different every time. For me, the way for me to get locked in mentally was to repeat the same actions, whether that was eating the same pregame meal, it was listening to the same music before a game, it was going through the same stretching routine, it was doing something in terms of stick work preparation or wall ball to get warm. Any of those little details that feel routine to you, that helps you bring down the nerves a little bit. It calms your mind. You're doing things without thinking about them. You're going through the motions. And then all of a sudden you feel warm, you feel ready, and you're just excited to play instead of nervous, where you're always going to feel a little bit of nervous energy. But the way that you settle into a routine, that automatically helps you focus in on the task at hand.
I'm going to go with a dad joke here. I'm not superstitious. I'm just stitious.
Good one.
Michaela Wilson, 8808. Do you still think Syracuse has a chance of making the tournament? So Syracuse did lose in the quarterfinal. I'm assuming Michaela's talking about the women's program.
Yep.
Did lose in the quarterfinal to Stanford. That's not a bad loss. Stanford's a top 10 team. But overall, that drops them to 9-8, and they finish on a 3-game losing streak. Losses to Virginia Tech, Boston College, and now Stanford. Here's the deal. They banked a huge win early in the season when they beat Maryland.
Yep.
And I think that Maryland win alone probably puts them in the field. They backed it up with that overtime win in the regular season against Stanford. So, and even though they have 8 losses, not any of them are bad losses. Someone could argue Virginia Tech's a bad loss. Still a top 25 RPI team on the road. So it's not a horrible loss. Obviously, it's a game you probably thought Syracuse would win, but I think Syracuse is comfortably in the field. They're going to have to play a difficult first-round game, though, where in years past, usually they get an easier first-round opponent.
I mean, they could be sent on the road somewhere incredibly challenging. I think you got to look at their strength of schedule. Now, we've talked about this before, but they're the number one strength of schedule in all of NCAA lacrosse, which carries weight with the committee. It doesn't carry as much weight as RPI does because RPI is a calculation, math, etc., that we talked about last week. That it's a very detailed process, but that does factor in the big wins that they've had. They haven't had as bad of losses as people may think, and the strength of schedule is incredibly high. Now, I do think they'll make it. I just think their road will be extremely difficult, especially in that first and second round, depending on where they're playing.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, I still believe in this team. Charlotte can tell you, I think I told you guys last week when we recorded the Lacrosse Rundown live from Charlotte, I still believe in this Syracuse team. They're young and they're inconsistent, but even in that Stanford quarterfinal, they got up 8-4 in that game. Like, there's stretches where they look like a complete team. So it's difficult with their youth to do it over the course of a 60-minute game, but I still believe.
Oh, wholeheartedly. I think their defense was great. I think Meg Road at the draw control has the potential to give them a lot of possessions against certain teams. So it's going to be interesting. It's one of the things that we're looking at, but Syracuse and the ACC, a potential 7-bid league.
I think they're going to get 7. Yeah, they're going to get 7. Incredible.
Unbelievable. All right, last question. Ava Lee asks, 2023 Northwestern versus 2025 North Carolina. Who is winning?
Wow, Ava Lee. Great question. You've been
That's a heavy hitting question.
It's got to be 2023 Northwestern just because of the way they played in that championship game. I think the goal of any team that wants to win a championship is how do you peak at the right time? And boy, did that 2023 Northwestern team peak at the right time. They left no doubt. I remember walking out thinking, I don't think there's any team that could beat 2023 Northwestern, like leaving Cary, North Carolina, the way the Wildcats played that day. And I do think you have to factor in the way they lost in 2022 because they were going to win that semifinal against North Carolina. Weather delay changes the momentum. North Carolina goes on to win and then wins that championship. I think that served as fire and motivation for them all year long. And ultimately, you had Izzy Skane in the best form of her entire career. So I think 2023 Northwestern is going to beat anybody. That you could ask me them against anybody I've ever covered, and I'd probably go with that team.
I would go with that team as well. Not for the same reasons, but for the reason that they were more veteran heavy and they were very experienced. So that plays a huge factor when you get to Final Four weekend. People sleep on the experience and the way that players show up to championship weekend. There are so many things going on, so much noise, so much pressure. The biggest lights, the brightest lights in the sport of lacrosse are at championship weekend. It's about who can handle that, who can calm the nerves, who can use their experience to their advantage and keep their team narrowly focused on the task at hand. And to me, that year, that Northwestern team had unbelievable leadership and a veteran presence. And you had Izzy Skane coming back from injury, one of the best scoring players of our entire lifetime in the sport of lacrosse. And you had Aaron Kuykendall. Both of them had Tewaaraton finalist seasons. Izzy Skane won the Tewaaraton Award that year. But the way that both of them played together, and you saw in the championship game, but you saw it all year long, defenses just did not know how to figure them out as a duo. We talk about Ashley Humphrey and Chloe Humphrey as a scoring duo for North Carolina. And they continue to impress, and they continue to get better. But those two, Izzy and Aaron, playing together, it was a beautiful sight to see for the sport.
In terms of games to watch as we wrap up another awesome edition of the Lacrosse Rundown, thank you so much for joining us and asking great questions. There's too many games to watch because nearly every conference on the men's and women's side is playing their conference championship. So obviously we already told you, but Selection Show is really what you got to watch. 9 o'clock on Sunday, ESPNU. On Saturday, here's a little treat. I think this is a world announcement. I don't think we've gone public with this yet, Charlotte.
Let's go.
The Lacrosse Rundown will be calling the MAC Men's Championship game, 12:30 Eastern Time on ESPNU, Saturday. Do not miss it. We don't know who's playing. We don't know.
We don't.
Because the semifinals are Thursday. Sacred Heart, heavy favorite to win it all. Siena, veteran team. That's the likely championship game.
But
you never know. You never know.
You never know. And this is what's so fun about this weekend. I mean, there's not going to be a better game to turn on than that one. Of course, we're a little bit biased, but we've mentioned the Ivy tournament, the Patriot League tournament. If you don't have plans this weekend, you've got an appointment with your couch, the TV, turn it on, watch lacrosse, and then Sunday night, we cannot wait to break this down with you guys after the selection show. We will be there with Hall of Famer Sheehan Stanwick Birch, breaking the news to you guys about what the bracket looks like and everybody's path to championship weekend. This is the best part of the year. This is what
bracket reveal.
Live
oh, wait.
Oh,
where does it? Yep. Bracket reveal. That backfired. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Bracket reveal. This will be a bracket in my hand this time next week.
Yes, it will. And you guys will see it here on the Lacrosse Rundown. So if you guys have a question that you want featured on next week's show, the big show after the selection show, make sure after this video ends, go to the live tab on my YouTube channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We know who is subscribed. We appreciate you guys. We love this community. But make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a comment on the video, because if you do with a question, we will make sure it is included in next week's show. This is what we live for, people. This is the best time of the season. We love celebrating lacrosse with you guys. We love talking about it. You guys are the best part of this show, truly. Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. are better than every other night of the week. So thank you guys, and we'll see you guys after we find out who's in and who's out.